Family disputes can make us feel isolated and vulnerable. Maybe you're going through a divorce or a legal dispute about your kids. Perhaps you've spent hours on Google or have even posted anonymously on Facebook to see what others have to say. But are you getting the actual information and support that you're looking for? Our podcast, Legal Lounge, aims to dispel misinformation and downright bad legal information to empower anyone with questions about their family, their children, their finances, their marriage, and the law. As a team focused exclusively on family law matters, we aim to help listeners not only with the information they need, but also with the hope that their situation has a solution. Short disclaimer, please note this podcast is for educational purposes only, and the information should not be relied upon as legal advice or for legal purposes. In today's episode, I have a friend of mine, Leah, who is actually coming to us from outside of North Carolina. Leah, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So I'm Leah Hadley. I'm the founder of Intentional Divorce Solutions and Intentional Wealth Partners. And I really specialize in helping people navigate financial transitions in their life. And so most commonly that is divorce. So that can look a lot different depending on what somebody's financial situation is. But I absolutely love doing this work. I've been doing it since 2014. So I've been a certified divorce financial analyst for quite a while now. I'm also a mediator, so I often work with both parties as a financial neutral, helping them to understand the financials of their situation and what their options are and that kind of a thing. And I'm just thrilled to be here with you.
Where are you based?
I'm based in Cleveland, Ohio, but I work with people all over the United States. I do not advise on legal issues at all. I'm really focused on the financial piece for people.
And in terms of a certified divorce financial analyst, I know some of our listeners and some of my clients that I work with on a daily basis, they sometimes intermix the CDFA with a financial advisor. Could you tell us a little bit more about how that's actually very different?
So, a certified divorce financial analyst or a CDFA can have a background in all kinds of things. Actually, there are some attorneys who hold that designation. There are CPAs, accountants that hold that designation. There are absolutely financial advisors that hold that designation, but that is specific training around understanding the intersection of the finances and the law as it relates to divorce specifically. And so, how can we as financial professionals really help people understand what their options are, what the tax implications are of the decisions that they're making, long term versus short term thinking, that kind of thing from a financial perspective. A financial advisor is going to be more of a general professional who's focused typically on maybe financial planning or investment management. Some financial advisors sell insurance products, but they might not have that specialized training in the divorce area specifically.
That's fair. And I have seen on my side as a family law attorney, CDFAs are able to step in to help my clients gather bank statements, investment documents, tax documents, basically any information and documentation related to the financial circumstance. Because as you and I both see, that is a big part of separation and divorce proceedings.
Absolutely. And it can be really confusing, especially if you were not the partner who was real involved in the finances during the marriage. A lot of it may feel very new. So you might even be collecting statements, not necessarily know what you're looking at. And so CDFAs can help educate you on your own financial situation. So that way you're not trying to go in to these negotiations blind.
Yeah, that's huge. Because I have seen more than on one occasion that a person is like, I know there's bank accounts, I know there's retirement accounts somewhere, and they just don't even know where to turn. And then go one step further when the attorney hands them a rather complicated looking document that we call a financial affidavit or financial statement or equitable distribution property affidavit. I see sometimes my clients, their eyes go wide, deer in the headlights. And although me and my team can definitely help, I see the use for a CDFA specifically because you come from a financial training and background versus us lawyers that do come from a legal and law
Right.
school training.
That's right. I think a lot of people there's a misunderstanding of kind
Mhm.
of how to use each of the professionals involved in the divorce process. But I really encourage people to look at it as like building a team around you. You really, that legal advice is so critical, you know that.
Mhm.
Um, but you can't necessarily assume that your attorney has that financial background to really help you understand specifically the short and long term implications of the financial decisions that you're making.
Yeah, and go one step further. Even if your lawyer does have a good financial acumen, sometimes that hourly rate for an attorney is astronomical,
Absolutely.
and a CDFA is just more beneficial from a cost benefit analysis.
Absolutely.
So let's kind of dive in a little further about these financial issues that present themselves in divorce. What are some common pitfalls that you see?
A lot of times people are very focused on the here and now. What
Mhm.
is uncomfortable in this moment? When we're looking at the marital estate, what are the assets and the liabilities or the things that you own and the things that you owe in this moment? And looking at kind of static values. As a financial professional, we look at the overall financial picture and we look at things like cash flow and we look at, well, if you were to give up this retirement account, maybe because you want to keep more of the home equity or something like that. What is that actually going to mean for you long term? Are you going to be able to retire comfortably? Are you putting yourself in a situation where that might not be a realistic outcome, right? So, really looking at the finances, not just at this moment in time, but helping you to understand how are these decisions really going to impact you for a long period of time? Because these financial decisions, for most people, this is the largest financial transaction of their life. And that may feel like a weird way to look at a divorce, but it does have implications for the rest of your life when we're looking at things like retirement accounts and life insurance policies and real estate and all of these different things. So, really focusing on the here and now, I get it. It's a really uncomfortable time that people are going through, but you do want to look beyond kind of the discomfort in the moment and make sure that you're setting yourself up for long term success. And one of the ways that plays out in a very practical way is maybe retaining retirement accounts or equity in a home in lieu of liquid savings. So giving up cash assets in order to retain certain other long term assets. Well, cash gives you options. It gives you choice, gives you flexibility. And so really focusing more on how liquid is my financial picture and less about I really want to stay in this house and this is where I raise my children or this is where my children are comfortable and that kind of
Mhm.
a thing, but focusing on the things that give you freedom and flexibility can be so valuable when we're looking at how to divide up the finances, and it often gets overlooked.
Yeah.
Another super common one is for a lot of families, the pension is the largest asset that they have if there is a pension involved in the marital estate. And a lot of people don't take the time to understand the true value of that pension. Even some cases, people are like, oh, that's her pension or that's his pension. They earned it, they can keep it. Well, like I said, for a lot of folks, that is going to be the largest marital asset. You're talking about, an asset that in some cases is paying out thousands of dollars a month for decades. And
Mhm.
so it really can be meaningful. And it's really, really important to fully understand what are your options as it relates to the pension, fully go into those negotiations, understanding that there are certain things that you can't do for certain pensions.
Mhm.
And so if you don't know what those things are and you come to an agreement, that doesn't mean that your agreement is going to supersede whatever the plan's actual rules are, right?
Mhm.
And so understanding your options, understanding the pension, how it works, how where you can negotiate those kinds of things is so important and is often I can't tell you how many times I see people years later where it was just not handled well, unfortunately, because they didn't understand.
Sure, or it was just a line item on a spreadsheet that people
Right.
did not truly understand. I really want to delve into the pension piece in just a minute, but your commentary definitely made me think of different strategies that I see from a legal perspective. So, for example, taking into consideration retirement accounts, including the possibility of a pension, also taking into consideration investments. Here in North Carolina, we're an equitable distribution state. What does that mean? It means that a judge can actually say 50-50 is not actually equitable, and rather certain investments, certain retirement accounts, or certain properties should be divided differently. One thing that I see come up often is the fact that, yes, although property is generally seen in a snapshot of time, right? We're looking at numbers maybe on a certain date or a certain time period. A judge will go one step further and actually see, okay, well, if one person keeps all the retirement accounts, does the other person have the ability to replenish any
Right.
retirement accounts? And that may not be a possibility for a certain spouse in a situation.
Absolutely.
So it could be that it may be a not equitable for it to
Mhm.
be 50-50, and rather the equitable choice could be that maybe 60% of a retirement account goes to a spouse that does not have the ability to replenish retirement accounts as quickly as, say, the other spouse. And
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate what you just said
yeah.
because it's interesting. A lot of people get it confused and think of it the other way. A lot of people think like, I earned it, so
Mhm.
I should get more of it. Like, so if somebody's going to
Gotcha.
get 60% versus 40%, I earned it. So if you're thinking equitable, then I would get more. But it's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's your own earning capacity and your ability to replenish and rebuild that retirement account. So oftentimes it might be the spouse who didn't actually participate in that plan as an employee who may be receiving the larger percentage.
Yeah, and to your exact point, I guess simplifying it for the listener that is like, "Whoa, you guys were speaking big words," is, hey, if someone has a job that has a 401k and someone doesn't have a 401k at their job, a court can consider that. A court and a lawyer can make the legal argument, hey, this other person doesn't have access to that opportunity, does not have
Right.
access to that 401k. And yes, there are alternatives like IRAs and other investment vehicles, but again, if a court is being presented the challenge of distributing a marital estate equitably, these are all considerations that come up in a judge's mind. And therefore, to your point, it could actually go either way in terms of where the retirement account's going.
Building relationships is a natural part of life. But how does the law affect those relationships? Do you want to marry your significant other, but have cold feet from the many divorce horror stories out there? Are you preparing for a custody battle against your ex? That is where Modern Legal comes in. We offer education and knowledge about the law when it affects the relationships near and dear to your heart. To learn more about how family law affects your family, book a consultation with an attorney of our Modern Legal team by visiting our website, emailing us, or calling us at 704-286-6302. Check out the information about Modern Legal Services at modernlegalnc.com.
Let's delve into the pension a little further. I love you bringing this up. I will say pensions are not as common as they were, say, 40, 50 years ago, but they still exist. In some entities, especially here in Charlotte, because I've seen some financial institutions like banks, because we're a banking city, they used to have a pension program. They've phased it out. But when we're dealing with a couple that has had one spouse working at a bank for 20, 30, 40 years, there is still that pension piece. Can you kind of explain to the listeners, including me even, because I love hearing about this, how pensions can be valued if they are actually dependable values that come up after evaluation, and how pensions actually work in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to understand that no two pensions are necessarily alike. So even, I'm in the state of Ohio, and obviously I do work nationwide, but I do a fair amount of work here in Ohio. And if we look at the public pensions in the state of Ohio, the state teacher's pension is not going to have the same rules as the school employee's pension, right? Which is kind of interesting. So it's really important that whatever pension you're talking about, you learn the specific rules around that specific pension, whether it's public, whether it's private, whether it's frozen. They come up in all kinds of ways. And we see it in the hospital systems, a lot of frozen pensions also, which means that like they're no longer actively putting money into it, but that pension still exists. And actually, for those who aren't familiar with a pension at all, basically it is a guaranteed stream of income in retirement, right? And so typically both the employer and the employee are putting money into that plan throughout their career. And then when they retire, they're receiving monthly income from that plan for the rest of their life. Now, there's some tricky things about that, right? When you go to retire, you make a decision on how to receive that pension. So when people are going through a divorce, they may be going through a divorce before they're retired, before they're receiving that pension. They may be going through that divorce after they're receiving the pension. It matters. It matters because the pension rules may vary based on the situation. And again, you have to go to that plan's documents to actually understand what the specifics are. But with that being said, when somebody retires, they typically have the option to take that pension as a single life annuity, which means it's based on one person's life and that they would receive that monthly payment based on their life for the rest of their life, or some variation of a joint and survivor benefit. And what that means is that the other person, if they were to continue to live beyond the pension participant, that they would still receive some portion of that pension after that person passes away. Okay. Now, another tricky thing to know is sometimes if people pass away before that pension is actually in payout status, there is no benefit to that surviving spouse. And so it could be that you really got to protect that pension benefit with a life insurance policy. That can be critical in some cases. But because what a pension is it's that money that gets paid out over time, over your life expectancy after retirement, the way that we value that pension is we discount that cash flow, that stream of cash flow in the future, back to a value that is in the present. Now, oftentimes, and this is the most confusing part for people, that is not the value that is on your pension statement. Oftentimes, the value on your pension statement is the money that was put into the plan, the contributions that were put into the plan, but not necessarily the value of all of that future payments, okay? All of those future payments. And so as you work within a pension system for a period of time, the longer you're working, the more your compensation is. Typically, you're going to see that the benefits are based on some percentage of the highest level of your compensation within that plan. And so it's going to change that income stream, that future income stream. So the higher that is, the more that the value is in that pension, the more value there is. Now, with that being said, I said you discount it back to the present value. So what does that actually mean? It means that if you had that lump sum of money, you would be able to invest it in some way to have that stream of income in the future. So it's worth less today than if you say, let's just use an example, $3,000 a month, for 20 years, right? You can't just multiply 3 times 12 times 20 to get the value of that pension. Because if you have that money sitting in the bank today or sitting in your investment account today, you can actually grow it in order to come up with that, right? But the value today is going to be less. It's going to be discounted at some rate. Now, with interest rates having gone up, we have seen those present values going down because the higher the interest rates are, the lower the present value is, because that discount rate impacts the value of that pension. Now, with that being said, why on earth would we be looking at the present value of the pension? It's because sometimes people are looking to offset assets. So maybe they want to keep a 401k and give up a pension, or keep equity in the house and give up a pension. So we have to know what that pension is actually worth in today's dollars. Now, with that being said, sometimes the pension is a really fantastic asset to really look at how to divide and protect rather than to offset, because again, we're looking at a stream of income for the rest of your life, guaranteed income. And so for a lot of people, they're not going to have another asset within their marital estate that provides that same benefit, right?
Mhm.
And so sometimes offsetting the pension really isn't necessarily the best option for you from a financial standpoint. Even though I know people want money that they have access to today, and a lot of times you cannot access these pensions until retirement. But with that said, remember what I was talking about before, short-term implications versus long-term implications of these decisions that you're making, and really understanding how valuable a pension can be for you in retirement, even if it was your spouse's pension. They can, for the most part, be divided. And then how they handle that actual division is going to be specific to the pension itself. But for some people, they would be getting their own monthly check, depending again on whether it was a single life annuity or a joint and survivor benefit. You might get it over their lifetime, your spouse's lifetime, your ex-spouse's lifetime, or over your own lifetime. And again, all those things have to be negotiated as part of this process, or else you're leaving it up to the person who has the pension to make that decision if it's not actually in your divorce paperwork.
And go one step further, it gets even trickier if we're adding in multiple marriages and
Right.
multiple situations where, for example, the pension beneficiary got married, got divorced. So there's a marital portion of the pension for when the marriage and the employment at that point overlap. We call
Right.
it the coverture fraction to figure out what that marital portion is. Maybe that happens again in the second marriage. And then the pension beneficiary marries for a third time and they pass away being married. And so that's how it can quickly and very easily compound, because there is a question as to what are those payouts going to be when the pension beneficiary actually starts receiving them. And if it's one thing to say there's benefits that go to parties, but what about three or four and beyond?
Right. And some pensions won't do that.
Yeah.
And so that might mean that you need to come to some other agreement in order to get that equitable distribution.
Yeah.
But you have to know that going in before you come to the agreement. So
Yeah.
that way you're not agreeing to something that you can't actually execute on.
I like to say when it comes to financial documents, most numbers I see on a financial statement, I can believe, but for a pension, I can't. You just
Right.
can't believe that number.
Right.
Shifting here, because you're a wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate you being here and explaining that. I could not have done it better myself. But divorce itself, it is a tricky field to be in. Sometimes there's a lot of work that goes into learning all these rules, especially like about pensions and retirement accounts. So, what is your why for staying in this divorce professional realm?
So this is such an important and underserved area. So some of the mistakes we were talking about before, these aren't mistakes that are costing people 100, 200, 500, even $1,000. In some cases, these are mistakes that are costing people tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars over their lifetime, right? When we actually look at the numbers. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that certified divorce financial analysts exist, or that there are financial professionals who are specifically trained to help people through divorce. But I think that the more that people are learning that there are people like us out there, the more that they can really lean on us. And I find it incredibly personally rewarding to see some of the successes that I've seen, because I know what the alternative could have been if I hadn't intervened. So, for example, I had a case in California where we were looking at how to divide the marital estate, and the marital estate had not been divided correctly. Like, it was actually, there was a huge portion for my client that was very identifiable as separate property. So in that particular case, my client was able to get $400,000 more in assets than she would have been able to get if they didn't understand how to truly divide or define that community property, so that way they could be divided appropriately, right? And that happens a lot of times if you're not asking the right questions to know where property came from, how it originated. It just kind of gets put into the mix,
Mhm.
and then you're not necessarily getting everything that you're entitled to. A big one that I help a lot of people with, which people don't even necessarily know is an option for them, Income is a very stressful issue for people coming out of a divorce because either, it's a one income household that then the other person maybe has to go out back to the job force or, look for some kind of other income. But at the end of the day, typically you have whatever the income was supporting one household now supporting two households, right? Which is going to be complicated no matter what the situation. And even if there is significant income there, it's a challenge, right? But what people can do is if they have investment assets, they can reposition those assets to be able to generate income so they have that steady flow of passive income that can help them pay their bills every month, right? So often when we think about investments, we think about the growth in the long-term kind of retirement opportunity. But there are a variety of ways to invest and really educating people and helping them to understand, hey, let's get your money working for you so you have better cash flow and you can feel more comfortable. Maybe you can, live somewhere that's going to be more comfortable or whatever the case may be. But really helping people to understand these things is just like I said, it's so personally rewarding because it's a time in somebody's life when you're faced with all of these decisions, you're in the midst of so much emotional turmoil. You need that objective person to kind of look at the financial picture and say, like, whoa, 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 that might not be in your best interest. So that way you can really make good decisions.
Especially because it's a reality. We don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And I get it. Attorneys are not cheap. CDFAs are not cheap. However, it could cost you more long term, a lot more, should you not get that team of professionals surrounding you to help guide you through this process. I think that is critical.
Yeah, I think I've seen the statistic around that like the average divorce is something like $20,000 or whatever it may be. But if I could just reiterate one more time that some of the mistakes that I see people make. So a lot of times people are coming to me years after the divorce to figure things out, or maybe they haven't settled assets, or maybe we need to do some forensic analysis to get things settled, whatever the case may be. We're talking literally in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars they lost out on because they didn't understand or they didn't get good advice during the divorce process. And it's really unfortunate.
Yeah. And with that average, it probably says maybe you need to pay a little bit more to get the right professionals on your team in the room in these discussions before anything is signed, sealed, and delivered.
Right.
Well, Leah, thank you so much for being with us today here in the Legal Lounge. Can you tell the listener where they can find you to learn more about your services?
Absolutely. And it has been my pleasure to be here. Um, Look me up at intentionaldivorce.com. We are Intentional Divorce Solutions is our divorce support. We do have a divorce coach on the team as well. So if you're really struggling with just kind of getting through the process, she's a wonderful resource. We do a support group and we do a free trial for that. So you can come check out our support group also. But I am on Instagram under Intentional Divorce Solutions, and I have a podcast, Intentional Divorce Insights, that I hope you'll check out.
Thank you, Leah, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our discussion. To learn more about me and the Modern Legal team, go to our website, modernlegalnc.com, or check out the links in our show notes to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also call us at 704-286-6302. If you have been intrigued by the conversation and would like us to continue our discussions, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. See you next time.